Hey guys, Matt, IronTrap Garage, and today we're going to do a little kind of vlog style update on the 32 Roadster. So we've been working on a bunch of stuff in the background, and I figured it's a good time to stop, show some of what we've done, and then also what we have going on. So Steve is working on some of the wiring right now. We'll show you a little later in the video. He's got just about all of the wiring terminated and connected that we can hear in a second. Check the headlights, taillights, turn signals, all that stuff. See if it works, the gauges, etc., etc. So he's got that going on. I'm going to be working on, hopefully by the end of this video, I got a bunch of these mandrel bend kits of exhaust. So I'm going to work on getting an exhaust built for the car. And right now we are working on, this car has this old Tach drive, or crank drive Tach setup. I don't know, my words aren't coming out, but this is a really rare early Stewart Warner Tach drive that actually is meant for a flathead, and it bolts onto unused bolt holes right here next to the water pump on a flathead, and then actually it sits and kind of floats in the center here and rides on the crank mount. Now what I think originally when you bought this kit, it came with a special crank pulley bolt that was the right length, and then it butts up against this little spring. The square drive goes into the Tach drive, and then this little spring, as you tighten it down, it compresses the spring, pushes against that crank bolt in the recess, and that's what spins your crank drive, or the Tach drive. But this car came, as people may remember, it came with no engine, so we don't, usually what happens is it gets separated because you don't take your crank pulley off when you take the engine out, so we don't have that. So what I've done is I took a original, the pulley that we had on here was a fan, the fan mounted on the crank, so I parted this, turned it down, left a little bit of a lip here for the washer to sit in there, and now we have a crank pulley that has room for this Tach drive. And then I also took this bolt and I turned it down as well, so that we got rid of the crank start hand crank little spiral section, and we have it face down here, but it still has that recess for the spring. So we're gonna be working on first getting that all set up, then we can drop it down. I have the radiator out getting cooked and cleaned to make sure it is good, and yeah, we got a bunch of stuff going on, and we will take you along for the ride, and hopefully we could fire this thing by the end with full exhaust and have working electrical system on this car. All right, so Steve's got the actual Tach drive here with the special cast iron bracket, and what we're doing is using some spacers. I think there was a little spacer that they probably had behind there to get this to sit all out, because if you take all the spacers out, you would have to run it with like no crank pulley and no crank pulley bolt, which we know is not correct. So we need to leave a little air gap between the crank pulley bolt and this face here, and then when you tighten it all down, it compresses the spring, so we have to get that all kind of right. So Steve's gonna bolt that up now and see how this all works after I face down that bolt. We're mid-project and say, hey, we should probably film a video on this. People might think this is cool. Who knows? They might.
Right, you never know. It could happen.
I think it's kind of neat.
Yeah.
So, like I mentioned, it uses, there's on either side of the flathead, there's two unused bolts. You can flip it either way. We're just leaving it the way it was because it was all bolted together. And luckily we saved this from the muddy floor of that old tire shop in Detroit. So looks like you might need some more spacers there. While Steve's working on that, I'm doing the important things. Where I stole Kate's one of our cookie tins, or whatever you want to call it. You can tell I don't cook. And Pete, our buddy Pete, delivered some sticky buns this past weekend. We got 3 left, so we were cooking them over the wood stove, which we keep nice and hot all the time. And now the shop smells like sticky buns, so I'm working on that while Steve's slaving away on the crank drive, Tach drive.
Oh man, you should smell how good it smells in here. You know, that's just, I'm okay with it.
It smells delicious. Got my coffee. We're good. So, yeah, added a couple washers there.
One washer.
One washer.
I think we got a good air gap now.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's probably hard to see. Well, you can kind of see on camera. I can definitely see there's a bit of an air gap, but yeah, it's a little tighter at the bottom. But I don't think the engine's going to move a lot. And
No,
since
it's not
this is
going to
rigid
move in
mounted,
that direction. Yeah.
no. Yeah, there's definitely plenty of a gap now. So now we could take our spring, drive wherever that is, mixed in with my coffee here, and this, we'll put this in and we'll test fit it, make sure it's all good, but that should fit pretty good. The other thing we were trying to get around is the Tach drive sits right where the radiator is, but on a 32, if you're using a stock cross member, the radiator actually sits over this air gap here. It goes from this pad here to this pad here. So this would be a major problem if you swapped like a Model A cross member. Because we're restoring this car, we didn't want to change any of that. So you could see this, like just the grease fitting sits right in here where you would have put the crank to hand start the car. So we're gonna test fit with the radiator real quick, just make sure that's all good. We're sitting back down on the mounts, and then we can get this piece installed and we should be pretty good to run our cable, our Tach cable here, mechanical drive cable into the car and get that hooked up, and that'll be a big thing solved on this car. All right, so it sits right down over, get the hole. You got to put this ear in first because it kind of goes, it slides under. Slides under that fender over. There you go. Now slide it back. Wiggle it back.
Okay, there we go.
Now we're sitting. Oh yeah.
Does it look? Is it good underneath?
Yeah, yeah, plenty
Excellent.
of slants.
Excellent.
You can actually see. Probably could almost see down in there. It's hard to see with the camera, but yeah, definitely is good.
You can get enough room to grease that thing.
Yeah, yeah, we got actually room. You could probably put the grease gun right through the grill. That's probably how they designed it, honestly. Like,
Right.
that's super cool.
Yep.
And then you can see the Tach cable goes right on here. Goes right there, and then the cable probably went under this hose or over the hose and then around into the engine. So that is huge. So now we can mount our pulley back up, get our belts back on and all that stuff, and we know everything's going to fit and should work with the old Stewart Warner wings, or Stewart Warner Tach with all our wings gauges. One of my favorite things on this car is the dash and the old Stewart Warner gauges. So now we can get 8,000 RPM Tach all hooked up, and I can move on to exhaust. All right, go ahead. So there we go. Everything mounts up, fits, and it is good. So now Steve's gonna run. The old cable is sitting over here. Oh yeah, here. So this thing we think probably mounted on like the pan rail or something like that. Went around the oil pan rail. So there's a bunch of these little brackets on there. So next thing is we're going to screw this on to the Tach drive, and Steve's going to try and figure out where they had this mounted by using these little brackets and get it hooked up to the gauge, and then we can watch the gauge bounce around when we crank it. All right, so we got, I'm using my flashlight here, we got most of our exhaust built here. You can see these really cool old Mitchell glass pack or steel pack mufflers that we got. My friend Carl had passed away. I got these from his and I've been saving them for the right project. So we got those in, should give a nice mellow tone. And basically where we're at is we're up over the axle on both sides here. Got good clearance of everything, got it tucked up real good, and we're trying to aim for these cutouts where the dual exhaust was before on both sides. So we pretty much got it nailed. It's coming out right where we need, and then the exhaust comes out right, you can actually kind of see it's dented right there. The exhaust came out, oops, like right in here. So right next to the bumpers. So we're gonna set this down now and see how everything fits. I want to just make sure that when we drop it down that we're not too close, or when we jump up and down on the car, it's not hitting, the axle tube isn't hitting the exhaust. I think we're pretty good, but we want to double check that real quick just before we go any further and make our tailpipes. All right, so what we're looking at here, if I can get the camera to focus, maybe, there we go. So we're trying to look at this, the original photo when the car was kind of found, and looking at the tailpipe. I didn't like that it was so close to the edge of the little bumperette or Nerf bar, but it looks like in this photo it's darn near touching it, and the edge of the pipe is the outside edge of the pipe is at the outside edge of the roll pan. So I was trying to fight it to get it to go in, but naturally, by looking at the dents underneath it here, it looks like it wants to live really close to that bumper. So everything's telling us that. I just was fighting it. But I think we're right. I mean, we're right there. As long as we can get this pipe straight, like left or right, I think that's probably where it needs to live.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And then, like we said, I remember these pipes were all bent because they got caught on something pulling it off the lift.
Right.
That one's in real far, that one's out. So I think we'll just split the difference and make it maybe like even with the bumper guards or something. See where it is. But we have just enough here that we can chop off and slowly work our way back.
Yeah, I think that'll work.
Yeah, it's pretty far out. It's like
right, and
they're not even. They're all banged up.
And this is a little bit bigger pipe again too, so it's.
I don't know.
Is it?
It looks like the tailpipes they might have, but it's hard to say. It might be inch and 7/8 and
right instead of 2 inches, right?
So we're right about where it needs to be. So I would say if we can get it straight coming out of the car, that's probably where we should just tap it. Camera.
The camera's gonna take a flyer.
Live action. Alright, ready?
Ready when you are.
Like you're here, watching Jurassic Park in 3D.
Yeah.
And that foot comes flying at you.
We're using our obviously brand new sponsored Sears Craftsman muffler tailpipe cutoff tool. Came straight from.
Right, we just got to deal with this company named Sears.
Yeah, they sent us this brand new tool that they have. Came out in 1961. These are pretty nice.
That is really cool. It's cutting nicely too.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't look like it was used very much.
Yeah.
But yeah, it became, some guy bought it, got it for Christmas. Right. Cut one set of tailpipes with it and then never used it again, your average homeowner.
Right.
Neighbor said, "Can you cut this pipe for me?" Probably wasn't even an exhaust pipe, he probably cut like a drain pipe or something.
Yeah.
I got just the tool for that.
Doing some plumbing in the house.
Yeah.
Oh, barber.
Yeah, nice cut, man.
Oh, barber.
Man, if they sold this tool, this would be a great,
Yeah, right?
this would be a great review for them.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we have these 2-bolt flanges here I got just from the local auto parts store. And what we're gonna do is this way we can disconnect the engine pretty easily from the exhaust system. So we're gonna push this up against this slip joint here. I'm gonna get a bunch of tacks, or a couple tacks put around it. Then we're gonna slide the other piece up tight against that, bolt them together, tack the other side. Then we can disconnect everything. And we're gonna cut the excess that's sticking out off. And then we know that this joint, well, everything will fit up how we want it to because it's slipped inside here right now and it's being located. So fingers crossed this will work out how I want, but that's my idea.
Get another one in there. Come on. This flange is so thick, it's like,
Yeah.
one more,
Yep.
and you can definitely take the flange off.
I'm sure there's something stupid we're not thinking of though. After we tack it, we'll be like, oh, you dummy.
That is entirely possible.
Especially this late in the day.
Yeah. There you go, snugged up.
Good. Have to slip out now.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that was a pain before too.
Yeah, it wasn't loose before either.
Let me know, maybe.
Twist it.
It's gonna come out straight. That's there we go. See, that side we don't have to cut anything, which makes it really nice.
Yeah, I just welded up. This
So, yeah, so that side, I don't know if we can get in the chop saw or we just take the sawzall and cut it off, and then we'll just grind it flat and then I'll weld in here.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that sounds like a good idea.
And then I can weld inside of it. You think?
Yep.
You think you can cut that?
Yep. got to get everything and turn everything into its spot at the right time.
All right, so we got the exhaust pretty much all finished up. We fired it up last night. We worked pretty late to get the exhaust done, and really subtle. You know, probably can't even really see much from the back of the car, but there was a lot going on to nail exactly where these pipes needed to sit. And we're going to start here in a moment, but I figured before we start it, we're going to show you guys all the lights and stuff working, because Steve's been working hard on getting most of the electronics on the car all hooked up and working. Electronics. All right, Steve, so if you want to pull the headlight switch, one of my favorite things is the back end of this car. So got the taillights working, and there's a light glow on that license plate like it would have had. So Steve had to get, we had to order a bunch of, they're basically like Stewart Warner bulb holders, like this little, this is the Tach here, little tiny bulb holders that go in for gauges is what they use there. And then also, if you look in the dash here, it's probably really hard to tell. There we go. You can kind of see at the right angle. So there's a little bit of a glow there. We do have to add, Steve realized afterwards that we got to add bulbs into the actual Speedo and Tach. That was something that we didn't realize, but they have little bulb holders that were behind and in between each gauge. So that looks really cool. So at nighttime that'll have a cool light glow to it. So that is all working, and now we have turn signals and headlights. So like we've done on a lot of cars, this car has headlights, and then the headlight actually blinks for, it's kind of hard to see from here. It's like just blowing the camera out. But I promise you, you can see it.
How about that?
Yeah, that's a lot easier. So we got the headlights that blink. This car never had turn signals from what we could find in the wiring. So he's got the turn signals all working there on the original 39 lights that were in there. And then we used this cool Art Deco style turn signal switch, which Steve had to kind of mildly restore as well, like everything else in here. So we got all that stuff working. Gauges pretty much all work. We did find that we had a problem with the tach. So we got all this hooked up like we showed you. We realized that this tach that was on the car is reverse rotation. And the part that we're missing is there must have been a reverser that went on here. And I have about 3, 4, 5 reversers. Yeah. We searched every single one.
Right.
Yeah, not a single one was right. For whatever reason, I don't know what they had on this, but in order to get this to work, this speedometer, which was in the car, we have to reverse the rotation, and I don't have one that has the right thread. So we're either gonna have to machine something or get a speedometer shop to make us one or see what they have. So we will work on that later. But now, let's see if we can get this thing to run and let you guys hear what the exhaust sounds like for a few seconds before we smoke the shop out. And obviously we don't have the radiator back, so we can only get it for so long to run. I'm gonna get you to see if you can get it to go yourself. We did have it running this morning for like a minute.
Check that fellow. All right, there we go.
It was in neutral. Gauge is working. Our fuel gauge actually does work a little bit. Temperature gauge, oil pressure gauge. All right. So, obviously we can't run it very long because of the no radiator thing, but we got the car running with exhaust. It's actually like sounds really mild. We obviously has those like steel pack or fiberglass mufflers in it, so those things, they're going to break in over time. It is a lot quieter than some of the cars, but I think as it breaks in, it's going to be perfect as a nice deep tone. And this car is more of like a gentleman's hot rod, if you will, so having the convertible top on it, full fendered, all that kind of stuff, I think that's a little more like what it had. And also when we took the car apart, it did have resonators in it, it had mufflers in the car, kind of similar to those, so I think that's pretty close to what it would have sounded like when it was together back in the day. But big progress on the car. Once we get the radiator back, we're going to hook all that up. I have to work on the tachometer thing. That's just something that's going to take some time. But we are only a couple steps away from filling this thing with coolant and moving it in and out of the garage, maybe around the property for the first time since like 1953, 1954. Really, really exciting. So thanks for following along. Let me know what you think of the new exhaust on the DeLorean Roadster. Thanks, guys. Catch you later.